Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Perspective. We'll be talking about the fact that, of course, we've seen the President snub the electoral reforms bill, in a sense that, of course, he said that this needs to be reconsidered. We'll be talking about the legal ramifications of this kind of reconsideration, what it means in terms of what the Constitution says, the timeline of it, and whether it will make a difference in the actual passing of this legislation in the electoral reforms going forward. We'll also be talking about the fact, of course, the Prime Minister has said today that there is need for a grand dialogue. He's also said that this is a time for all political parties to put aside their differences and think about the country and not personal interest. Whether there can be that kind of relationship between PTI at this time and the government, PDM, all other parties which are part of the government also remains a question. We'll be talking about that. We'll also be talking later on in the last part of the program about the Makkah Route Initiative, which is one of the pilgrims, part of the Pilgrims Experience programs of 2020. All of that today on Perspective. I have with me today Saeed Minhas, who's a senior journalist. Thank you so much for joining us today. And Barrister Yasir Latif Hamdani, who's a legal expert. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Minhas Sahab, like I said, we were earlier also talking about this. The fact that this has happened as far as the electoral reforms is concerned is not really a surprise, in the sense that, of course, we have had a situation as far as the governor in Punjab is concerned, and we've had the president's role in that also. He's been, not for it as far as, and then eventually there was a huge, there was a time delay, but then eventually it had to go forward and it went forward. As far as the Constitution is concerned, and I will go to Yasir on this also, but as I understand it, that all this can do is probably just delay it about 20 days or so, and then it will pass through. But overall, what kind of a signal does it send, in your opinion, in terms of constitutional crisis? We're also grappling with the economy being where it is at this time. So how do you see it overall? We've also had statements from Rana Sanaullah today about Imran Khan Saab, back and forth exchanges, all of those things. What kind of a situation are we looking at this time?
I mean, it's, to say the least, you said the last right thing, that this is chaotic situation, highly polarized country, and in that polarized country, nobody is caring about the politics of economy.
Right.
They are talking about politics of personal gains. And this is the main problem of this entire current situation, that the egos of these politicians are driving them very high, and they are talking about national interest. They are talking about caring for the people, but practically they are not at all concerned about the national interest. They are not at all concerned about the real state of economy, because as we see the numbers, regardless of PMLN or regardless of the coalition of this, and regardless of what Imran was telling us, everybody was telling the false picture to the people of Pakistan. Now the reality is slowly and gradually dawning on them, and they're not very far from the Sri Lankan model, because they have to realize that, for me, major concern is that the president can play some tricks. You can play the party politics, being a president of a certain political party, everybody knows. So as you rightly said, that the Governor Punjab episode, what happened? Nothing. Just a delay of few weeks, months.
But the kind of signal that it overall sends,
yes,
the kind of uncertainty it breeds for the economy also, one can't ignore, right?
And that's my concern, that right now the situation is, or wherever, if you look at the history of political movements, I'm least bothered about Imran Khan's long march or any other long march which was done in the past. I'm more concerned about the people going jobless, because the news coming from the textile industry is more concerning for the country.
Right,
because when you put the people out of job, they are the ones who bring revolutions in any society. And we saw that starting from 1917 Bolshevik and all those revolutions, workers started that when they were pushed against the wall. Price hike does not create revolutions, because price hike, if I'm earning, I'll manage it somehow. I'll cut down this expenses, I'll cut down that but if I'm out of job, I am left high and dry, and that is where more concern for Pakistan lies, that there is a huge segment of society which is likely to go jobless because of this politics of egos, and nobody is taking care of the real economy of the people, and that is where I am more concerned about that kind of state. The president should look into that, Imran should look into that, because playing into the egos is just fueling or playing with the fire, and right now we are sitting on a tinder box.
Let me come back to you. Yasir, as far as overall the situation is concerned in terms of what happened with Governor Punjab, how do you think, I mean, what is the situation likely to be? What do you think who will gain out of this delay at all?
Well, I think other than the fact that the president is showing himself to be a partisan president, nobody really gains. This is bad for our parliamentary democracy. I mean, after all, just as you said, 20 days, essentially that is what it is. 10 days is the period of assent that is required, goes back to a joint session. Then if the president doesn't give his assent within 10 days, the assent is supposed to be given anyway.
Right.
So it is essentially a 20-day delay period that you are looking at. But the president was hiding behind Article 46, unfortunately, and saying that the legislative proposals had to be shared with him. I wonder how many legislative proposals the previous government shared with the president. It's just, it's an extraordinary moment for a parliamentary democracy.
Okay, but in terms of optics of it, I mean, as far as you know, him showing himself to be like, you know, Saeed Minhas also said, it seems to be a clear sort of demarcation in the sense that he stands with PTI. He's not showing himself to be unbiased. He's not showing him the kind of largesse one would expect from the president of Pakistan at this time. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem to be there. Again, overall, as far as our situation, economic situation is concerned, do you think that you know, these kind of gimmicks, one has to call it that, right? The kind of delay that we are seeing, then the courts get involved, which is what happened with Governor Punjab also. But overall, it does fuel uncertainty. And you know, with the dollar being where it is, with the economy being where it is, the talk of grand dialogue, which is now coming from Shehbaz Sharif Saab, do you think it's possible at all in this kind of an environment?
I think the sort of the polarization that exists in the society right now, it would be a very hard ask to actually imagine there being the kind of conditions that would actually bring about a grand dialogue. So I'm not very optimistic about there being this dialogue, but since the Prime Minister had said so, so let's hope that he's right and he can somehow pull the rabbit out of the hat.
But of course, I mean, the Prime Minister is talking about a grand dialogue, and it's certainly the order of the day. But you know, when you have statements, you would need PTI. I mean, one would expect for that kind of grand dialogue, which means you would essentially need Imran Khan Saab. But when on the other hand, you have statements like arrest and all of those things going around, that doesn't really promote the kind of goodwill one would expect, you know, for there to be for that kind of a working relationship. And during the last tenure, don't you feel we lost out because there was no working relationship again between the PTI and any other political party outside the parliament, in opposition at the time?
I think when you paint your opponents as evil, that's when all dialogue ends, and that is what we've seen over the last 4 years.
But do you think there's a mistake that might be, you know, under the threat of being repeated, or you know, that the government might be, you know, angling towards making that mistake also?
I certainly think so. I think maximum room to maneuver should be given to Mr. Imran Khan, and the reason for that is that otherwise we will probably end up seeing some sort of agitation.
Again.
And that agitation itself is not good for the country. There are several events, several business events that have been postponed as a result of the former Prime Minister's decision to come to Islamabad with his long march at a certain period. So what will happen, unfortunately, as long as we have this uncertainty, as Minhas Saab said, we're going to continue to have economic uncertainty as well, and that itself is going to lead to a general snowball effect which might lead to something more disastrous.
Do you think that's what some, I mean, that's what Imran Khan Saab or the PTI, you know, because again, I'm going to go to Minhas Saab, you know, there's a time and again this intervention. You know, on the one hand, there is all of this talk, neutrality, intervention, all of those things that keeps coming up from now, it's coming up from the PTI. Do you think that there's hope of creating that kind of environment where perhaps that eventually happens? What are the politicians hoping overall?
I think this is a very unfortunate state of affairs right now in Pakistani politics, that they are not at all believing on the vote bank. They are not at all believing on their organizational structure or political parties. And unfortunately, whatever they call them, the neutrals, the imposers, whatever you call them, everybody is looking towards Rawalpindi now. And this is a very unfortunate moment. And Rawalpindi, time and again in the past few months, they have come out publicly to say that keep us away from this.
Right.
And this is, I think, good from them, because they know that how involved they are into this entire structure.
But the more disassociated they want to be kept, I mean, the more we have statements and the more we have,
I mean, they have warned.
Opposition parties.
They have even gone to the extent of warning them that there is a law, don't embroil us. But still, nobody is stopping, because everybody is calling them with all the fanfare that they should, because Imran is asking nobody else but them. Now, if we look at the stopping of Imran Khan's long march, the government and the coalition partners, they were not ready to take it on until and unless they got a signal from somewhere, from the most powerful segment. So that's when they decided, in the last few days, when they decided that, okay, we are going to go harsh on them. And that's again, Zardari was involved in there, Nawaz League was involved in there, and all the other smaller coalition partners were involved in. But as your question pointing out towards the right direction, that is it the way to go? Is it going to help our democracy? Not at all. Is it going to help the political parties' culture? Within the culture, they have all sorts of autocracy within the political parties. No political party in Pakistan, except perhaps Jamaat-e-Islami, they have some kind of quasi
but we have
democratic setup
at this time. Minhasab, as far as the Prime Minister is concerned, he's said that for him the focus right now is only economy. He wants to focus on economy. He wants to target whatever FDI we can get. He wants there to be certainty. For that reason, he's also said there should be a grand dialogue. There should be a kind of working relationship. When we talk about legislation, also Yasir, when we talk about legislation, it is true that at this time in the parliament, perhaps they have an open field because there is no PTI. But in terms of passing this legislation, if we look back, I mean, don't you think that it was railroaded to begin with? In terms of numbers, of course, at the time, I mean, there were 30-something legislations passed, I remember, during that evening when this was one of those. And now that we've seen a reversal of that, again, there's no, the sanctity of parliament itself, the opposition saying, I mean, if you call PTI being the major political party, which is saying they want to sit out. So what kind of a message is this sending out? And then what kind of legitimacy? Do you think that there's a chance that that can also be questioned later on? Because we're not saying anything on the resignations at this point. Of course, they're in the field. The Election Commission hasn't de-notified the members at this time. And then what is the status of this legislation? Of course, it's been passed, right? And once it receives the assent from the president, which will happen anyway, do you think that there's a chance that it can be questioned at all?
I think it can't be.
Okay.
Because what you have is a parliament that has a certain number of members deciding in favor of a particular bill. Once that is done, and then let's assume this goes to the joint sitting of the Parliament, Senate and the National Assembly.
Right.
You're ultimately going to have a very valid law enacted as a law should be enacted. So I don't see why anyone can question, or how anyone would question the validity of this law or on any of these laws. So as far as PTI saying, or PTI sitting out of the parliament, or saying that our resignations were not accepted, or whatever permutations that they can come up with, I feel that the very fact that they're sitting out itself is a choice.
Right.
So therefore the question doesn't arise in my mind. The law is a valid law, and unless of course it's repealed by another parliament, and I think as far as the president's delaying tactics are concerned, that is simply.
But don't you think it shows, a flagrant disregard for the situation of the economy, the precarious situation we're in at this time, as far as overall the state, energy crisis at this time, the situation all the government is grappling with this at this time, and the focus only seems to be to create a kind of chaos which will invite either an early call for election, what that will do to the economy, what that will do to, the kind of spiral it will send, or already, a downhill economy, and doesn't seem to be of any concern at this time to the opposition, mainly being the PTI.
Mm-hmm. It isn't, and it's unfortunate that the politics of personal gain, the politics of power politics essentially has been the order of the day when it comes to PTI. I think the narrative that the PTI has been spinning, let me be very frank, it has captured the imagination of unfortunately ill-informed people in the masses. The whole conspiracy narrative, which makes absolutely no sense whatsoever, but everyone is willing to believe it. So what you have is generally a political party that has gone off the rails and is now heading in any direction, it's going to cause destruction. So that's my view on the matter. I think PTI is playing with fire here, and I would say it's time for Imran Khan to cry halt before it gets out of hand.
I think, MAHRUKH, eventually the custodian of whatever they call themselves, of the territorial, the geographical, the ideological boundaries of this country, they eventually have to come in. Because one thing we have to realize, Shahbaz has gone out, the Prime Minister has gone out now. Right. Whosoever is there, we respect the chair of the Prime Minister because it's representative of Pakistani people and the Parliament and the system. So whatever the case may be. So Prime Minister has gone out and he has got nothing from two places, right? So he is going to another place now, and we don't know whether we'll get. Why? The reason is simple. If there is chaos at home, and when everybody is looking at us, and they know that there is a troublemaker who is already has taken the road to the roads, and he is known for creating disruption, then creating an atmosphere where the society can grow and gel together. He is not at all doing that, and unfortunately he does not have a political party on the ground. We saw that in that long march. There was no organized political party there. It was all from one person, and this is unfortunately the cult thing which has come up again in Pakistani politics, and in subcontinent it's very normal.
But Minhasab, isn't it concerning? Because if you look at it, and I'll take Yasir's opinion on this also, it's not just, I mean, we blame literacy when we talk about this kind of narrative which is coming from the PTI, but it's not just the people who are below the literacy level, the uneducated people. Unfortunately, even in some cases, educated people.
This is the concerning point,
right?
Because there I a little bit disagree with Yasir that yes, the ill-informed can be a different thing, but illiterate is a different thing, right?
Yeah.
So half-informed is a different thing. So that this is half-informed people who love to do their activism on social media. So this is social media activists. That is another thing which Imran is totally miscalculating, or Imran's political party is totally miscalculating. That they believe that since there are 2 million likes to their tweets, there are 3 million likes or followers, that is not going to be encashed when it comes to facing the lathi charge, when it comes to facing Rana Sona right now.
Or when it comes to the votes.
Or to the votes even.
Right.
And this is what they are not understanding, that one person, Shahbaz Sharif is not talking about Imran Khan. Shahbaz Sharif is not talking about anything. Yes, he is talking about trying to figure out how to gel in and how to stay there till August 2023.
And if you saw the first address that he made, he was very candid. He said, look, this is a situation, this is what we've landed up with, and I'm going to try and do my best, which is what came across,
We like or don't like him, but he is not going into that war path.
Right, exactly.
But only one person, and the entire PTI is countering that one person, and that is Rana Sanaullah. the federal minister. He is saying that I'm not going to let you do that, create that chaos in the country, and whosoever comes and breaks the law will be taken care of. So everybody knows him, he has a background, but then the entire party is going towards Supreme Court. Political parties don't take that course.
That route, right.
I have seen political movements in this country. I have covered Benazir Bhutto's Long March. I have covered Nawaz Sharif's Long March. Not one, twice both of them hit the roads, and twice none of them went to the courts for protecting them or for saving them. What is this? This is political game. This is the political maturity.
And then you malign institutions. Those, I'm going to go to Yasir also, but yeah, and then you malign the same institutions.
Exactly.
And you say, look, this verdict, because this verdict didn't go in our favor, therefore there's something wrong here, or it's not quite right, or all of that social media activism, then the pressure tactics, whatever you may call them.
You are defaming each and every institution in the country, and that defaming openly, and this is not going to serve anybody. Even if he comes, I tell you, if he comes back, what does he think? That his political party will have an easy ride?
I want to talk about that. I want to talk about that. Yasir, you've been wanting to say something.
Yes, first of all, the reason why I said ill-informed, not all illiterate people are ill-informed, and not all literate people are informed, right? We live in the post-truth era, the era of fake news.
Right.
And the narrative that there was a grand conspiracy, that and that has been something that Mr. Imran Khan has doubled down on. Yesterday he added 2 more countries to the ever-growing list of the conspiracy narrative.
Conspirators.
Yes, all the conspirators that are involved in bringing down his government for God knows what reasons. What is it that was his achievement that kind of merits his this threat that he's become to the world, as it were. So that is something entirely different. As far as the maligning of institutions is concerned, it is extraordinary that when the decision goes against PTI, the same institutions are bad, but once it goes in their favor, as was the case in 63A, they hail the decision and they hail the institution. So I think at some point we have to declare that there has to be neutrality across the board. Now this narrative that neutral, God doesn't want us to be neutral, this narrative is very dangerous. You need a neutral umpire for there to be a balance between the various parties, or various actors acting in the political sphere. So I feel that the whole narrative that Mr. Imran Khan is spinning, PTI is spinning, is very dangerous for our future, and I hope that better sense and statesmanship prevails on him and his party, and they come to their senses and don't pursue this disastrous
Overall,
course.
as far as the situation is concerned, Minhas Sahab raised this point when you said that what does he think he's going to do. The point is, as far as the situation is concerned on the ground, like you said, in terms of getting money, in terms of getting FDI, in terms of improving the situation of the economy, even if there's another prime minister in the chair, is there any other solution? Because I had somebody, from the PTI say that there is very little, room at this time for maneuverability of any kind. You have to stick to the IMF program.
Exactly.
You have to do what they're saying. You have to take these hard
Imran's
decisions.
government went to IMF. They did not go that. And I mean, that can be debatable, that who put what conditions, but IMF always comes with conditionalities.
Right.
It's not first time or first country in the world that we are getting those conditionalities. Wherever they go, that is their mandate. They go with their conditionality, 5th generation conditionality, 6th generation conditionalities. They have a list of conditionalities. In 80s and 90s, we saw that they came with the reform, structural reformation of the countries, of economies. They have done that. Now they are post that, and they are going into another kind of liquidity, managing the liquidities of the countries, after especially Sri Lanka's example. Now the problem again is that Imran Khan's governance model, we saw, miserably failed. We saw they failed to produce a team of experts, which they have been boasting about, that we have team of experts. We failed to get it. Eventually, we saw Shaukat Tareen coming from People's Party's wings to manage their finances. Wonderful. We saw worst kind of governance where Prime Minister had to come on the TV and ask the people that tell me if there is price hike. What the heck the entire bureaucracy is doing in this country then? If everybody, is it a kingdom? Is it a king talking to the people? I mean, this mindset has to go out. We were crying as journalists when other political parties started becoming that kind of kingdom mindsets. And this is where Imran, I think, is totally missing the plot, that individually you might be able to pull some crowds. Individually you might be able to defame and question some people and personalities, but then eventually, remember, you have to come, if you are playing the power politics and if you are allowed to come back into the game again, what will you do? You have created so much rift in the society.
Is, even if, yes, and you've created rift, and at this time, when we saw the long march happen, don't you think it should be a reflection for the PTI itself within its own ranks? Because, you know, they were the people and the failure to kind of get a mass people.
There was a big hue and cry within the political party, his party, because if you, I have heard that today he held the core committees meeting. And as usual, we have seen so many core committee meetings of People's Party also, of Muslim League Nawaz also. As usual, it was Imran Khan's meeting with the core committee, not the core committee's meeting with Imran Khan. Nobody talked, because the problem is that he has got a very close kitchen cabinet, which was running the entire show when he was in the government. He has got a kitchen cabinet who does not want anybody to get close to Imran and tell him the reality. So whatever Khan Saab is saying after coming out of his hujra, then he believes that he has got some divine message, which divine message he is giving to them, and they are supposed to just follow it. And this is going to be not good for him, for political party, and for the political culture of this country.
And in terms of, Yasir, in terms of trying to get that kind, if he feels he has that social media support, or if he feels that to translate that into votes also, to have that kind of organization that is needed, will be needed for the next elections. Don't you think that perhaps they need this time more than other people to get that kind of organization for themselves? I mean, even if they do have an election, whatever happened in the long march, you know, doesn't actually show that it's going to be great in terms of getting them the kind of votes that they want.
Well, they certainly need to organize again. That much is clear, and there has been organization within the ranks, as it were, reorganization. I mean, you know, the moving of Shafkat Mahmood and the other sort of, I think Mr. Shah Mahmood Qureshi coming in and that sort of thing, because Punjab was an utter failure when it came to mobilization of resources or mobilization of people. Unfortunately, the problem with PTI and the problem with Mr. Imran Khan is that he thinks that if the elections happen tomorrow, he's going to come back with a 2/3 majority. And this he thinks because he has been able to draw some crowds in certain...
In the Jalsas
in
earlier
Jalsas,
on.
right? And when he came out, and that was because of the narrative that we're talking about. I don't think that's how things translate into votes. They don't. And I think it would be better for PTI to take this 1 year and try and regroup. But unfortunately, they're just too caught up right now in this idea that this, and they, you know, the sort of the language, the sort of the narrative, imported government that, imported government this. This is their narrative. They're like continuing doubling down on it, and I think as long as that happens, they are going to end up alienating people, reasonable people, from their ranks.
And in terms of having, you know, some sort of presence in the National Assembly, you know, they would be, in terms of numbers, there would be an opposition to reckon with if they actually came back and if they actually played the kind of role that is needed at this time. You know, an effective role. If they feel so strongly about this legislation, if they feel so strongly about what's happening in the National Assembly, why not come back and take part?
Precisely.
You know, giving them an open field isn't really going to work well for the future.
Remember, Imran is not a person for an institution. Imran believes it's a self-centered person. Because we have seen him from his cricketing days. It's a completely one-person show, one-man show. But he unfortunately still believes that he is in a cricket ground where he can call the shots and people will clap. And he has created a narrative on which people came out, and not only the common people, those people who were doing all the activism, social media activism, they also came out with and we saw that 4 months in Islamabad, right in front of the parliament in D Chowk. We saw them, what they were doing there. But the problem is that we should understand that Imran is a spoiler. Imran is not a builder. And in politics, he has more sway on creating rifts and creating divisions than creating a team. And that is what we have to understand. Country cannot, and that's why I say that those who want to run these affairs, who have a vested interest in the survival of this country, survival of this economy, they have to come in. What we need instead of a grand dialogue, I mean, we need maybe a grand dialogue for inclusion of all sectors into governance
all
model.
Stakeholders, which is also something that keeps coming up. But unfortunately, he doesn't want to play ball as far as Imran Khan Sahab is concerned.
He wants to take it all or take nothing.
Right, which is, and he's ended up with nothing till
So
at
far,
this point. So we have to sort of see, and in terms of who is going to be the eventual loser, at this time we're seeing, it's the country that's suffering, it's the people that are suffering, unfortunately, and one hopes that can change. Thank you so much for being with us, Saeed Minhas Saab. Yasir, thank you for joining us today on this. We'll come back after a short break and talk about the Makkah Route Initiative.
Book is life. Book is hope. And book is light for the future.
Welcome back. We'll be talking to Fahim Al-Hameed. He's a journalist from Saudi Arabia. Thank you so much for joining us, Fahim, on the Makkah Route Initiative, which is part of the initiatives of the Pilgrim Experience Program, Saudi Arabia. Fahim, can you tell us a little bit about this and what it means as far as Pakistan-Saudi relationships is concerned, and of course for the Hajj pilgrimage that is going to happen very soon?
Thank you very much, MAHRUKH, Hameed. Really very happy to be with you and your distinguished guest. Let me explain about the philosophy of Makkah Route. In fact, this initiative has been started before COVID-19, and it was, started with 4 countries. The philosophy of Makkah Route is to minimize the time and to reduce the burden and to digitalize the journey of faith. Basically, this initiative is the brainchild of the 2030 vision, which His Royal Highness the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman has introduced, and it is the first, step for this digitalization of Hajj. As you know, that the whole journey of faith now Saudi Arabia is going forward. The smart card and, the robotics in Harameen. This year, Saudi Arabia has taken the initiative in the post-COVID-19 to start with 5 countries, and of course, Pakistan's relation with Saudi Arabia is very strategic. So Saudi Arabia has decided that Pakistan will be one of the 5 stations which we are going to go for this Makkah route.
Right. Okay. We're also seeing that today some Saudi officials are expected to come to Islamabad airport. They're also expected to set up the whole project and have it ready for the pilgrims to assist them, as I understand it.
Yeah. This system is integrated with the Pakistani immigration system. So everything, the immigration, the stamping, the boarding pass, the luggage, everything will be done in Islamabad or Lahore, depends where we are going to start. And the passenger or the Hajis, once they enter to Saudi Arabia, the airport, they will be built as a local passenger. So the main operation room will be in the airport, where Saudi Immigration Office, all different sections of government-related, Hajj-related personnel will be stationed in Pakistan, particularly in the airport. So they are going to do everything automatically. Once the pilgrims arrive in Jeddah, they will be taken immediately, no immigration, no passport, no luggage, nothing, immediately to the bus and to their destination. Their luggage will come to their room. I think this is a very, very huge step for digitalization of Hajj.
With hurdles and problems that pilgrims face, because obviously there are a huge number of people, of course this initiative has been taken to help pilgrims. Overall, in terms of the numbers are concerned, we've seen have the numbers been reduced as after COVID, or in terms of the people, the quota allowed? Of course, Pakistan remains one of those countries that enjoys the highest number of pilgrims that are allowed to perform each year, right?
This is a very important question. Saudi Arabia yesterday officially announced that 1 million pilgrims will come for this Hajj. Some of them, if I'm not mistaken, 60%, if I'm not mistaken, from abroad, and 40% from Saudi Arabia, internal locals and Saudi Arabia. So the quota will go as per the percentage of the population. For instance, Indonesia will be number 1, and I think Pakistan will be number 2. So those people, as per the percentage, all countries will be coming to Saudi. The Hajj pilgrims will come to Saudi Arabia as per percentage. Now the question is, how many of those people will be coming through the Makkah route? This depends on how Saudi Arabian authority and Pakistani authority are working on that. Is all 85,000 pilgrims, if I'm not mistaken, who are going to perform Hajj going through the bus, or half of them? I think even if it's half of them, because we are having the 4 countries which is the most populated Muslim countries. Indonesia with 300, Pakistan with almost 250, Bangladesh 250. Yes, they are not coming as a full-fledged as per percentage, but you can imagine, if you give me half a minute, if you can imagine that, Saudi Arabia will open Hajj full-fledged like before COVID, 3 million or 0.2. So the number will be benefiting, because, this initiative is reducing the whole procedure to 50%. So Saudi Arabia, why Saudi Arabia has brought this? Because Saudi Arabia wants the pilgrims, even before coming to the ritual side, they should be relaxed and they should be in proper facilitation.
Also, in terms of the cap that has been set from the government, as I understand it, the Saudi government has reduced that also, because initially it was expected that the rate of Hajj as set by the government was much higher. But of course, they made a lot of efforts. Our government also, had a dialogue with the Saudi government, and that also was reduced significantly, right?
Let me explain one very, very important thing to your viewer. Saudi Arabia as a country never involved in cost and this and that. Saudi Arabia is spending millions or trillions of dollars and riyals to make the Hajis come here and enjoy this ritual site without any pen. So anything related to this is something related to the, Hajis and Hajj companies and this and that, which, government has to deal with this, or the private sector. As long as Saudi Arabia, the government, we are facilitating the pilgrims, and of course, there is a certain entities or companies, they are involved. And this is one of the part of the understanding between the private sector and even company government.
Of course, and we also have seen the relationship between Pakistan and Saudi Arabia, the history of our relationship. We saw, of course, the Prime Minister make one of his earlier, after he took over as Prime Minister, the first visit, if I'm not wrong, was to Saudi Arabia. And, he met with King Salman. He met overall, our relationship with Saudi Arabia, of course, has been very long-standing. In terms of as a journalist, how do you see our relationship moving forward in perhaps, next year or so? Overall, in terms of the kind of initiatives, the kind of, help that both countries can provide each other?
Well, absolutely. Saudi Arabia and Pakistan enjoying a very high-level strategic relationship. As you have mentioned, the Prime Minister, Honorable Prime Minister of Pakistan, visited Saudi Arabia in last Ramadan, and he met with His Royal Highness the Crown Prince. A lot of things, very good things going to take place, inshallah, in the near future. Saudi Arabia and Pakistan, they always work for the Muslim Ummah to find solutions, just cause for the Muslim Ummah. I can see, a very fruitful and positive elements in the future coming, inshallah, as far as the Saudi and Pak relation is concerned.
Fahim Al-Hameed from Saudi Arabia, thank you for updating us on the Makkah route initiative. Certainly, it's one of those historic measures that has been taken to facilitate pilgrims during Hajj in 2022, and of course, this will mean a huge, it will mean, of course, a benefit for the pilgrims at this time, and also mean a more ease facilitation for the pilgrims during this Hajj. Also, it also emphasizes the kind of relationship that we've historically had with Saudi Arabia, the kind of initiatives, the kind of help as a friendly neighbor, country, Muslim country, which has always been there for Pakistan in terms of our relationship, our bilateral relations between Pakistan and Saudi Arabia. Thank you so much for joining us today on Press.